Allow me to introduce Mr. Carl Richards. He spent 25 years behind the microphone on radio, stage, entertaining and influencing audiences across North America. He's a co-author of The Dawn of a New Entrepreneurial Age. He's a former TEDx speaker, emcee, speaking podcast, and founder and CEO of Carl Speaks. After generating over $1 million from speaking, Carl helps entrepreneurs and influencers find their voice, to speak with confidence and grow their thriving, profitable businesses. He lives with his spouse in Gananoque, and notice I said Gananoque, Ontario, and he enjoys boating on the Thousand Islands, and he's a self-proclaimed culinary artist. Chicken Jackson, anyone? I'm curious about the Chicken Jackson. I'll let you fill the rest of those blanks in. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you very much, Bernie. What a great introduction, almost like I wrote it myself. But no, thank you so much for the warm welcome. Chicken Jackson, does anybody want to know what Chicken Jackson is, really? Seriously? Okay, yes. I have to start my presentation with that. So boneless, skinless chicken breast, Cajun seasoned with a layer of cream cheese and then a thin layer of smoked salmon on top.
I'm hungry.
Okay. Now you know. So thank you so much for the welcome, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be chatting with you today. Essentially what I do is I help entrepreneurs and business owners navigate the still somewhat confusing and unknown world of podcasting and demonstrate how you can launch simply with compelling content, usually in 30 to 60 days. So that's what I'll be sharing with you today, some tips and some information about podcasting. Let me start off by asking this question. Does everybody know what podcasting is? Some people are still unsure about it. Okay. Hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a better understanding of what podcasting is, how it can be very beneficial for your business, especially as a marketing tool and another way rather to promote yourself and share what it is that you do. So I'm just going to share my screen and get started. I can do that. Yes, I can. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. Everyone can see? Okay. And I can see you on the side. That's good. Can everyone still see my screen okay? Awesome. Okay. So what I want to start out by sharing is just what we're going to cover today in the 3 hours I have with you. It's 3 hours, right? It's not 3 hours. It's only 30 minutes. Okay. It's maybe 30 minutes tops. Okay. So here's what you're going to get out of today. Firstly is a better understanding of what podcasting is, how it's going to be of value to your business. We're going to explore why podcasting, of all the things that you could be doing as a way to promote your business and market, why is podcasting something that you should be embracing, especially as we get into 2021. So we'll be chatting about that throughout the day, throughout the 30 minutes, not the day, the 30 minutes. We'll explore why you aren't podcasting. What are some of the reasons or some of the excuses, if I can use that word, that you're consistently telling yourself why you don't have a podcast? To go along with that, what are some of the things that you're missing out on by not having a podcast that could be quick fixes to help you become a little bit more relevant in your business? What you need to get a podcast up and running for under $100. There are many different types of podcasts and many different models to get you up and running. I'm going to share with you how you can launch simply and affordably. But that's not to say that there aren't additional resources out there. We won't be diving into them today, but there are additional resources out there for those of you who are, in a, high 6 or 7 figure income bracket and you can afford to have somebody do it for you. That's another discussion way after today. But so how you can get launched simply and in the podcast universe with little to no revenue. The advantages of being a podcast guest. If you don't have a podcast, there's this thing called being a guest, and I'll explore that as well. Some Q&A, and then what's next? Where do we go from here with this information that I've shared with you? And I will be sharing at the end of this presentation a resource that will allow you to move forward from there. Is everybody okay with that, by the way, if I share that resource at the end of the day today? Okay, cool. So Bernie's done a great introduction to me. So this is somewhat, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's a lot of repetition. Yes, I do have a background in broadcasting. I have been doing speaker coaching and mentoring for the last 7 or 8 years as well. Have been writing. I do have a podcast. That is my artwork, by the way, for the Speaking of Speaking podcast. You'll find it on Apple Podcasts and a few other platforms as well if you want to check me out there. I also cook leg of lamb if you don't like chicken Jackson. If you're coming for dinner, leg of lamb is your other option. But I usually marinate it for 72 hours in red wine and spices, just so you know. So it's really tasty. But no, seriously, that's a bit of background about myself. And thank you again for the warm welcome and introduction. Before I jump into the podcasting, I just want you to know that if you're not already doing speaking on the virtual platform, which you are, 9 out of 10 doctors do recommend it as part of a healthy diet. Okay, I'm actually making that up. But speaking is known to be one of the quickest, most effective ways to grow your business and position yourself as the go-to expert. So if you're not speaking, my recommendation is, whether it's through podcasting or whether it's through another platform, that could be Facebook Live, that could be webinars, that could be, once we do get back into the live arenas of speaking, that you're getting out and doing more speaking, or in networking groups and organizations such as Connect Ottawa, where you can then be invited or be a speaker within your own networks too. So get out there and do some speaking. I think it's going to, especially in these times, the more you can get out there and speak, even if it is on virtual platforms, I think the more successful you'll be in your business. So why podcasting? Let's back up the train a little bit. I don't have a slide for this, but I can say this quite easily by, for those of you who don't know what podcasting is. Everyone knows what radio is, correct? Well, radio really is the original podcast. It's that audio that is provided to you. It's not interactive. I guess it can be if we're thinking about talk shows, but it's typically information and entertainment that allows you to engage and be, have that information available to you. So if you think of podcasting kind of like radio, or think of it as, I also tune it to something like Netflix, where you have a directory of all the things you could possibly watch. And you have some things that are movies. You have some things that are television shows. You have some things that aren't movies. They're not television shows. They're more series oriented, or they're chunked into different episodes. So that's how I would describe podcasting, as a directory of audio files and themes that you can then tune into, whether they be for business, whether they be for entertainment. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of entertainment style podcasts out there, comedy being the most popular type of podcast out there. Second to education, and education can be anything from conventional education, meaning classroom type work, to coaching and leadership development. So podcasts allows you to, as a leader, as a business person, position yourself as an expert and get into the global market, as we're going to see very shortly. So why podcasting? Well, first off, not everyone is doing it. Not everyone's doing it. And this number, by the way, has changed. When I first did the deep dive into podcasting, it was about 5 years ago. And at that time, for every 900 blogs, there was one podcast. Now the numbers are more like, for every 500 blogs, there's one podcast. But it's still, in a lot of ways, the wild, wild west as far as the number of podcasts that are out there, which I'll share with you momentarily, and show you how you can obviously clearly cut right through and be a part of the excitement or the energy that is podcasting. There's no limits to where and how people can listen to you. And that's just the audio platform, by the way. If you're thinking of podcasting, and, I listen to my podcasts, or I can catch my podcasts on YouTube, technically those are video series or video casts, not podcasts. So think of podcasts as the audio format of that. And people listen to them in the car. They listen to them while they're working. They listen to them while they're working out. They listen to them while they're on their lunch break. I know people that listen to them while they're out on their morning walks. So there's no shortage of places where you can listen to a podcast. I wouldn't recommend church. You're supposed to be focused on something else. But no, seriously, you can listen virtually anywhere. And that's the nice thing about podcasts, is there's no limit to where and how you can listen to them. Podcasting shows that you're not afraid to do something that's different and innovative. It used to be 20 years ago Websites, if your business didn't have a website, you probably didn't need one. Now, show of hands, who has a website? Most people do. Who has a yellow page ad? Most people don't, because we've recognized that over that time, we've had to innovate in our businesses and accept the fact that the world is changing, and all of a sudden, boom, my business that didn't need a website before, all of a sudden does, to attract more clients to me, because this is where people are living. People are living in a virtual world. Whether we like it or not, that's where we're living, especially during COVID-19. Dare I bring that into the presentation? But that's where we're living, and that's where we're networking and doing things now. So it stands to reason that if you can innovate and be different and make yourself do something different with your business, you're going to stand out over your competition who might be a little bit stuck in their way of thinking. Okay, keep that in mind. There's no limit on topics. I mean, when I teach podcast training in some of my workshops, I go to my phone all the time and say, okay, type in this subject matter, type in public speaking, how many topics come up? Type in marketing, how many come up? How many podcasts come up? Type in real estate, how many topics come up? So there's no shortage of topics. Everything from even visual things that are visual, like photography. There are photography podcasts. You think, well, photography, that's visual, but there are still photography podcasts, believe it or not, that are talking about some photo shooting techniques and all those things. So there's no limit on topics. And because of that, guess what? There's no limit on content. There's no shortage of content. Now, there's probably no limit on content in your business already. Margaret Ann has at least 20 podcasts. I know that she's ready to launch 20 episodes. I'm so excited for that. But there's no limit on content. And the more podcasts, the better. Some of the trepidation with that is, well, if I have a podcast, that means I have to cut through all that noise. How am I going to do that? Well, isn't it the same with your website? Aren't there millions of websites out there that you have to, get on the, navigate through to make sure that people are getting to yours? So it's the same thing with your podcast. That's why it's a marketing tool for you to elevate what it is that you do, your credibility, and all of those things that allow you then to connect with more of the clients that you want to connect with. Here are some latest stats on podcasting. Now, this originally came out in February, I believe, of last year. And then guess what? Global pandemic happened, so they've recognized that we can't put these stats out only once a year. We have to put them out a couple times. So as of October 2020, these are some of the stats. Over 1.5 million podcasts in the world, which is up from 550,000 2 years ago. And that number keeps going up. 50% of all homes, this is a US stat, by the way, but 50% of all homes are podcast fans. In the US, that equates to some 60 million homes. I do have a Canadian stat to share with you. The number of Canadians, and as a matter of fact, it lists a number of different nations. Canada, I can't remember where it ranks, but it does rank in the top 10 of podcasts, nations that are listening to podcasts. So 28% of Canadians listened last month to podcasts. So that's roughly a third. That means roughly 10 million people tuned into a podcast last month. South Korea, by the way, they're way ahead of us when it comes to listening to podcasts. Some 58% of people are tuning in on a regular basis. It's huge. And I think it's only going to continue to go that way as more and more people are getting into podcasts. There's how the demographics break down a little bit more. You'll see a lot of younger people up to the age of 34 are listening to podcasts. That's not to say that people in my demographic, I'm closer to 35. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm 48, but 35 to 54, they're listening to podcasts too. But also people who you think wouldn't be listening to podcasts are, the 55 pluses. They're still tuning in, and there is so there is definitely some audience there for you, regardless of who your client is or the demographic that you serve. Ask yourself this question: how many are potentially your ideal client? How many are your ideal client that might want to learn from you, especially if you're the expert in the field? That's just a note of where that information comes from, by the way. If you'd like, I can send this to you after today if you want to do a deeper dive into that. So why aren't you podcasting? Let me just, you can come off mic if you want. I'd love it if you did that, actually. Just shout it out, not all at once. Why aren't you podcasting? And then we'll see how many match up with my list. So Margaret, and your mic is on. Why aren't you podcasting?
I didn't really know where to start and a little nervous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Why aren't you podcasting? Fear?
Yeah, nervous.
Fear? Okay. All right. Sure. Okay. Anybody else?
I used to podcast and I just got out of it. I think it's a matter of getting back into it.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. And I didn't see in the gallery view who that was. Who was it? I was just speaking, by the way. Was that
Lisa?
Lisa.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. Anybody else?
For me, I think it's one of those things. I have so many things that I'm busy doing. It's time. And I'm always concerned about starting something that I am not going to be able to keep up.
Okay. All right.
Once you do that first one, and then the expectation is you're going to do more and more of them, and the time commitment to preparation and making sure that you're putting good material together and then presenting it. And I don't know, it seems to me like it could end up being very time consuming.
Absolutely. And I think everyone has hit on it. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that, by the way?
I think adding it as a routine, it's much like, to do the blog, to do certain things, you should do minimum once a week or once a month, depending on the nature of who you're reaching out to, and just habit.
Yeah, so habit, routine, time. Some people also say money. They don't know where to start. So these are what I would consider the top 6. I believe there's 6 reasons here. They believe it's too expensive. And yeah, it can cost money, but as I said, I'll share with you some information today to show you how you can launch on a budget if that's something that is important to you, but you still want to get the word out about what it is that you do. So that belief that it costs like $1 gajillion because you have to set up a state-of-the-art studio, you don't have to do that. You can do it quite simply and for a fraction of the cost, even factoring in training, by the way. Time consuming. Well, anything we do at first, I know getting into the gym is time consuming, but I know I need to do it. I know I need to, if I want to lose that 5 pounds, okay, it's more than that, but those few pounds that I want to lose, I know I need to dedicate the time to it. If you knew that you could record a podcast, edit a podcast, and get it uploaded into the podcast universe and only spend an hour to an hour and a half a week doing it, would it be worth it? And you can, by the way, I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying that to impress upon you that time factor can be mitigated by just making sure we manage that time and manage your podcast to be how you want it to be. It's too complicated. There is a lot of complication when you don't understand the process, but that's what I do is I walk people through the process and make it very simple. That's why this is called Podcast Launch Made Simple. My programs tend to have made simple in them because we do want the process to be as simple as possible, certainly from a starting standpoint. Also, some people believe it's not for their type of business, and that might be very true, but is it the type of thing for your passion project? Is it the type of thing for your hobby? People more than ever before want to know the personal side of you, not everything about business. So would it make sense to have something that is maybe talking about your love of gardening or my love of boating, for example? That's not what my podcast is about, but would it make sense to do that? And then, oh, by the way, this is what I do, and that's part of my biography, or every now and again, I have something that is business related I can feature. There's certainly the opportunity for that as well. People get hung up on how to monetize their podcast, how to make money from it. And also people, as I know some of you have already said, don't know enough about it and don't know where to start. You don't know where to start. Well, you start by getting some information, which is what you're getting today. So there's more valuable information to come, not just today, but beyond today. And I certainly hope that you'll reach out after today as well. Here's what you're missing by not having a podcast. And this is in my opinion, but it's also in the experience of other people who have reached out to me and said, you know what, I knew I needed a podcast. It took me longer than I thought to launch, and I wish I had launched sooner. Here's what you're missing out on by not having a podcast. Potential clients you didn't even know existed, because you're reaching out, you're creating a marketing, you're creating on a marketing platform you don't have. Of course, you're going to reach a new brand or a new breed of client, which mainly is the global market. There's a lot of people in the global market, depending on what your business is. Even if you are a brick and mortar store, or you are a traditional business, you can still showcase yourself as an expert, get into the global market, and you might not necessarily get clients, but you might be asked to be guests on other people's podcasts, which is something that I'll be talking about very shortly. Future speaking opportunities. I have received this fall alone 4 speaking opportunities, and it's because of the fact that I have a podcast. If I didn't have a podcast, I wouldn't have received those opportunities. And if speaking is a way to quickly grow your business and position yourself as an expert, wouldn't it make sense that having a podcast or being a guest on a podcast is a great way to do that? I would say yes. You're also missing out on potential partnerships. I had a lady reach out to me about a month ago. Her name is Kay Slane. She's actually the guest on my podcast tomorrow. And she reached out to me. She found my podcast, then listened to it, reached out to me and said, hey, Carl, I want to be a guest on your podcast. Since being a guest on my podcast, we've also talked about future partnerships and collaboration within the podcasting world. That would not have happened if I didn't have a podcast. Is it going to help monetize? I don't know, but it's a collaboration and a partnership that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have a podcast. Business growth. Last week, I had an online education company reach out to me who found my podcast and said, hey, Carl, we love what you're doing on your podcast. We'd like you to be one of our instructors for our online learning. And again, I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm just saying it to impress upon you that part of my business, oh yeah, and they pay, which is kind of nice. But that would not have happened if I didn't have a podcast out there to position myself in order to do that. And you could be missing out on money because you might not be reaching all the clients that you can or that you want to. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're ready to launch and you want to launch immediately, well, here are some of the things you need that you can do that fairly quickly. Number one is you need a theme or format. You need to know basically what your podcast is going to be about. You can't just start recording and blindly do it. You've probably seen Facebook Lives that are like that have no beginning and no end and no purpose to them. There are some podcasts like that too, by the way, but you really want to have a purpose for why you're podcasting, regardless of what that is. So the theme and format is the first place to start. Microphone and either a headset or earbuds. I have both actually, and I have another desk mic, but if you have a headset like this, or like Bernie does, or a pair of earbuds like this, or a fancy schmancy microphone like this. If you don't have that, that's fine. But the earbuds or the headset, really that's all you need to record. As long as you're getting good quality audio from it from a starting standpoint. You can always upgrade from there if you want. You need a way to record it. And I always suggest Audacity because it's free. There are other platforms as well. GarageBand for Mac users, I believe it's part of when you open your Mac and it's your Mac, it's there. I'm not 100% sure, but certainly for Mac users, that would mean GarageBand or another one. Cover art, you can again source that out through Fiverr, or you can even do it yourself if you're savvy that way. Theme music, there's the public domain and a lot of free resources where you can get music for free. You can also source that out through Fiverr as well. If you have a colleague or a friend or even a family member who writes or produces music, there's an opportunity there as well. You need a place to upload. Personally, I like Buzzsprout. I'm not just saying that because I'm an affiliate of theirs. I'm saying it because it's so easy to use. It's one of the first platforms I came upon, and it's number one in the world as far as currently number one as far as ease and simplicity of getting your podcast out there. Buzzsprout, if you're wondering what that place to load is, or that hosting site. It's basically the conduit between your recording and the directory. So it's sort of that midpoint. It's kind of like the water to two bodies of land. So that's what the upload site does, is allow you to them to host that podcast for you, so then it can be aired out or picked up through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other places as well, which is the final thing, which is a place to host. So iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher, just to name a few. But that's essentially it. Obviously, you need a host, which would be yourself. If you decide that you want to have guests on your podcast, that's something else you would need. I suggest keep it simple from a starting standpoint. Don't start with guests unless that's the type of thing that you want to do and it's important for your brand. But start on your own. Start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable doing a podcast, so that way you know by the time you have guests on that you're then ready for them, because you've already had a couple of podcasts too that have established you and your credibility. So you don't have a podcast yet. It's okay. If you're even in the process of launching a podcast, or somebody like Lisa who hasn't done a podcast in a while, but she's thinking of getting back into doing podcasting, you can be a guest on a podcast. So what are some of the benefits of that? Well, number one is you get to promote your expertise, which means you get to talk about your business a little bit, the area of which when people say, what are you an expert at? You say, well, I'm good at this. And that's what I like about it. Again, allows you to get on a global platform as opposed to just in front of a room of the people who you already know. It's connecting with somebody who you don't know, and then them sharing through their network, and of course you sharing through yours too. Again, future speaking opportunities. As a matter of fact, being a guest, I treat it as a speaking opportunity. So again, it's another way to grow and expand your brand and your market. Potential partnerships can come out of that, just like I mentioned about Case Lane. We're thinking of that partnership. That could happen for you as well if you're getting guesting opportunities or you're looking for guest opportunities on other podcasts. How about connecting in a new market? That's huge, to connect in somebody else's market. Maybe there's people within that market that you already know, but I bet you there's a ton of people within that market that you don't know. And that's a great opportunity too. And then again, potential new clients, because you're connecting in all those different areas. And again, they're seeing you for the first time, and it's new to them. It's new to you. So what's next? Well, here's what I would say the next steps are that you might consider taking. Number one is start listening to podcasts if you haven't already been doing it. Start with the things you like, maybe that you have a passion for, or that you have a hobby. Start listening to those. If you are really into business, listen to some podcasts that are of interest to you in the business world. Decide to be a guest. You can be a guest on somebody else's platform. And by doing so, again, there are many opportunities, like I've already shared on the previous slide, of how that can elevate you or give you some, encouragement or energy or incentive to have your own podcast too. Research. Do some research to find out what podcasting, what podcasts are out there already that speak to your existing clientele, that maybe your clientele are already listening to. Once you've done that research, so you see what is out there, to see how you might fit into the podcast arena, into the podcast universe with what your unique selling proposition is going to be, then do some soul searching and ask yourself, is it for me? Is it really for me? Not is it for you, but is it for my brand? Am I at the point in my business, or is my brand ready for a podcast? And if the answer is yes, then it's time. And then I would suggest getting some podcast training. I'll share a resource in just a moment that'll allow you to do that for absolutely $0, but at least get a little bit more of a taste on top of what you've learned today. Some podcast training, and then on top of that, which is what I'm here to do, to help you do, not today, but certainly outside of today, is to get podcast launch support so that you're not doing it on your own. If I had gotten the support that I needed, and this is if I had done this, which I didn't, I thought I knew enough and could do it on my own. But if I had gotten the support that I probably needed to launch, instead of it taking me almost a year, I probably could have launched in 35, 40 days. So that's what that is a little bit of support to help you get going and help you navigate through some of the complications, especially when it comes to the technical side of things, which tends to be a hang-up for some people when it comes to podcasting. So I've done a lot of talking. So what I'm going to do now, before I share my last 2 slides, which are my wrap-up slides, is ask, are there any questions? And I'm going to put this on gallery view so I can see a few more people and ask if there are any questions.
Now, I don't know. Can you put it on gallery view?
I can put it on gallery view. I can also go through my last 2 slides, and then I can take the slide deck down altogether if you like.
And then we could just see everybody. Okay.
And I can just see everyone. So let me do that.
Jenny, did you want something?
So Joel Germain actually has a question for you. What do you do about imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome?
So
yeah,
I'll let Joel do it. Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Joel.
So yeah, we were asking the 6th question on why people probably didn't launch one like right away.
Yeah.
I know in my field, there's a lot of people, if not everybody, who have imposter syndrome, and that's also one of the reasons why most of UX designers don't start a podcast, don't start to do anything, because they don't feel like they have the strength, or they have not the strength, but they don't have enough knowledge to be able to do that. So they always feel like they are not really good enough to do what they are doing. So what would be your take on that when it goes to podcast?
Yeah, sure, Joel. I certainly thank you so much for asking that question. That's where I think getting as much information as you can, such as why you're here today, and finding out a little bit more. But I think that's part of the doing your research and doing a little bit, even taking a program like this resource here. I'll just share this with you. And I'm answering your question by going to this as well. Now, this is a free workshop week coming up in January that some of it we've already covered today, but it allows you to get more information. So if you are feeling anxious about the process, or there's something that making you go, I don't know if this is for me, you actually, when you do this free workshop, and not to give away all the nuts and bolts here, but you actually walk through you walk through establishing the first 2 or 3 steps of launching a podcast. So if you have those tools already and you have some support to get you there, then it's just a matter of allowing yourself to step into that place of, let the fear go. GTF, well, get the fear out, as I had a thought leader say, GTFO, get the fear out, and allowing yourself to then embrace something that is new. So I think this is a great opportunity to do that. And I'll post the links in I'll post it in the chat momentarily, but this is a great way to do that for sure, is to do that. Does that answer your question, sort of, to at least get some more information? I think I understand where you're coming from. I think it was easy for me having a background in broadcasting. It's like, well, podcasts should be easy. Once I started walking through the process on my own, that's when I realized, okay, I needed some help. And now this is scary, and now it's new, and it's what am I going to do? And what if people don't listen? All of those self-talk that stops us from doing everything. But then once I realized that, okay, yes, this is something I can do, and yes, this is something I need to do to connect with my audience, it was sort of the catalyst that got it moving in the right direction for me. Okay.
Cool.
I have a question in the same direction, but a bit maybe different. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I already find that there's a lot of noise. And by that, I mean a lot of noise on all social media platforms, on all groups, on websites, there's just so much. Everybody's talking, everybody's filming, everybody's saying something. And podcast is a great idea. I'm actually now really, really considering it. But as you know, Collabified is in the business of making sure that whatever is out there, it's truthful. Yeah. And whatever is out there, it's actually genuine. Mm-hmm. So if you're having a podcast, or if you're listening to one,
Yep.
How can you distinguish between, sorry to say, but you know, the BS and the real ones? Because it's not everybody that is saying something, it's worth listening. And it's not and that could be me as well. And that could be one of us. Like, why is it worth listening to what I have to say or anybody else has to say? And how would you make sure that your podcast is actually real and it's actually legitimate in some sense? Is there any way to prove that or to say that, you know, to legitimize yourself before you even go and start speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this question, Susanna, and this is not to be a jerk by in any sense of the imagination. Are you a real person?
I would say so.
Yes or no? Are you a real person? So are you a real business, you know, entrepreneur? You have a product, you have a service that you provide?
Yeah, those are not good questions for me, though.
No, I'm asking that question.
I'll go very philosophical on you, so that's not good.
Sure, absolutely. But what people in the podcast universe will be looking for is they'll be looking for, and this is why, and this is getting a little bit advanced for the questions, is when you launch, you don't launch with one episode. You also don't launch with, you know, me wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt and promoting myself as a business expert, as a speaker or a marketing coach, or however I want to position myself. I'm going to position myself as an expert. I'm also going to make sure that my credibility is that the proof is in the pudding, that I'm making sure that all of those, and I understand what you're saying, there's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of noise, and there's also within that clutter and noise, it's sorting through to see, okay, well, who's real and who's not. There are some really good business coaches out there, for example, and there are some really bad business coaches out there, and I've met both. That doesn't mean that they're not business coaches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my credibility and I'm going to make sure I'm putting it in the front. I'm going to make sure that I'm letting people know that I've spent 25 years as a broadcaster, that I've helped people through speaking. On my website, I actually have testimonials and I have a client list of all the clients that I've nurtured over the years and the organizations to which they belong in. So I'm going to bring that to the forefront. I'm also going to make sure if I'm hosting a podcast or if I'm thinking about it, especially if I'm thinking of guests, that I'm going to invite guests that have that same credibility that I have. So I'm positioning myself as an expert and I'm bringing the guests to the platform as experts as well. But that also means, Susanna, it still has to not so much look, because it's audio, but it has to sound professional. It has to sonically, you know, the vibe from it the artwork has to look professional, and the quality of the sound has to sound professional. That's what I can do, and that's how I would suggest, and that's why I help people launch their podcasts, is to make sure that if you're launching as a business professional, that it is professional, that if you're doing cover art, that it's not something that's from, you know, 20 years ago from, what was that? Microsoft used to be able to grab like clip art. That's not clip art files. It's your picture. It's artwork that speaks to your brand and your professionalism. So I leave it up to the individual to do that, but I also help them along the way. And I'll even question, are you sure that's what you want to do as you're doing that? So that would be my recommendation. And yes, there is a certain philosophical side to it. And I can't speak to that because I'm not a philosopher, but I know that I can tell by going through the podcast directories which ones are people who are serious about business. They're the ones that probably are putting out content all the time versus the ones that are tire kickers that put out maybe 3 episodes 4 years ago and then said, that's it, I'm done. So that's my take on it, and we can certainly have this discussion offline. I'd be more than happy to. I think it's fascinating, that philosophy, because I think that's important to make sure that if you are doing that, that you are connecting with the people you want to connect with.
Carol, can I just unshare your screen now so we can have a bigger view?
Yeah, sure.
No, sorry. We're done.
No, that was my contact slide. I'll make sure I put my contact though in the window. I'll stop share. There we go. Bigger view. Woohoo!
Yeah, I get to see your faces
Hey,
now. Sorry, I didn't realize you weren't finished.